I love you, bro.
I love you.
And it may sound strange to say, like we didn't know each other existed, 6 months ago. And then when people hear or watch these conversations, they're like, is that real? Like, do they really love each other? And I think so much happened so fast in that container for us that I could see very clearly where your heart was. And I'm an open-hearted person, so when you find that chemistry, it's they lock together and just like, oh, okay, we're simpatico. I know I can be open and vulnerable. I can cry and I will be supported, 100% by you. And I know that you feel the same way about our container and about me. And, it's hard to explain to people when you're like, that you feel this love for another human being so quickly and so powerfully, but it's real. It's real if you allow it to be real.
Hey everyone, and welcome to another episode of Going Out Looking In, the podcast where we're exploring the human experience through conscious conversations. My name is Maxi, I'm your host, and today we're deep diving into the world of podcasting. That is with my fellow brother Harry Duran. He's the co-founder of Fullcast, which I would call a conscious podcasting consultancy, where he helps you, as somebody who might want to start a podcast, to launch one and to create one, and how to get an idea that you have for a message and for a purpose that you want to bring into the world through the spoken word, through a podcast, into the world. So make it real. He will guide you, he will assist you, he will provide his expertise. And I mean, that is, I guess, enough said for the reason to have him on here, is just because I wanted to deep dive and pick his brain, but also share experiences that we both have and had in the world of podcasting. And so that was one intention of doing this. I also have been invited to one of his podcasts, Podcast Junkies, where he interviewed me, which was an interesting experience to sit on the other side of the table and being asked questions. And that is also something that in this episode for me was so important and so valuable, and that is to talk about with Harry as somebody who's really experienced in having deep conversations on camera and on recording, on tape, is the mystery and the phenomena of being self-conscious when creating. So there's a huge development I can certainly self-reflect within me when I'm looking at the development over the podcast that we did, over this conversation. And by just sharing more and being more open, more authentic, you get like, you work yourself closer to the core and to yourself. And then that introduces a new depth to what you're creating, and I guess we're all creating art, right? All of this is art, life is art, as Rick Rubin also so beautifully points out. So that's all what we are sort of like touching on in this episode. So whether or not you're trying to create something and want to create something, we talk about brotherhood and men's work and the importance of that, and self-reflection and self-awareness and healing and flourishing, and facing the shadows. All of those beautiful things are in this episode as well. So looking forward to bring it to you, and I'm interested to hear your thoughts and feelings towards also kind of like I said, the development and how you perceive that in this episode, and also the vulnerability shared towards the end. I would love to hear from you. I also want to take this as a quick opportunity to just call out all my men. I'm calling you in, men. If you are listening to the podcast, if that's resonating in any way, shape, or form, you don't need a lone wolf it out there, all right? Maxi Bartel, Instagram. The line is always open. Reach out anytime. All right? The brotherhood is the medicine. The connection is the medicine. Conversations like Harry and I have are the medicine. There's profound healing in connecting, especially men with men, women with women, and mixed containers as well. All of that, they all have different qualities. And I just wanna just set the stage, okay? Come in, right? Open the door. I open the doors. Come in, men. Right? I love you all. Thank you so much for being here. That's it. Beautiful insights with this episode. And Harry Duran. What's alive, bro?
Checking in with anticipation for the future in the next few months in my world. We are settling into the house that we live in right now and moving into a more homesteading environment, and was looking at the turkeys this morning, so I just saw some deer go by. And so really it's this reconnection with nature, so this appreciation to this returning to the land for me, which I think is really important, and also the energy towards building a home, however that's defined, and for me, we're working on a family together with my partner, and so that's really important for me. So this anticipation, I think, is top of mind for me, and hope, and I think that energy of like acting and feeling like it has happened already, I think is important. It's something I practice on a regular basis.
Wow, that's a beautiful check-in, man. There's beautiful stuff in there. Oh, I'm so happy for you.
Yeah,
there's a big fields that are opening.
Yeah. For sure.
I'm checking in with so much gratitude for this whole experience, like the human experience and the reality that I sort of live in right now. It's absolutely overwhelming right now. So spend a whole day outdoors and deeply in touch with myself to a degree that I have not for the last, I don't know, actually since my travels, man, like since October, since going to the Sacred Sons Convergence and doing this work, and being by myself a lot, and far away from home, so that sets me up for looking inwards quite a bit and then coming back. So there was a lot of stuff that I had to work through, and now I'm so happy. Oh, so happy to be here and so grateful. Today I published the interview, went live from Yale, my interview with the Yale University. I was interviewed, like, what? Me? Yeah, but like, it's crazy. It's just crazy, and I'm so happy. And on top of all of that, how do I put this in a discreet way? I met a beautiful person today. I met a beautiful person today, and just how the universe brought us together, like in nature on the mountain. That was really, really beautiful. So I'm checking in just with gratitude today, not too much heaviness, which has been on top of heart and mind for so long. So I'm just so grateful. And now to finish all of this up with a conversation with you, I mean, I'm super excited. Oh,
that's great. Congratulations on the Yale interview. And what I would invite you to feel into when those things happen, instead of why me, wow, maybe shift that slightly to say, yes, me, of course, this is the energy and this is the direction that I'm moving in. And I just say that as something that I'm working through on a day-to-day basis. I'm reading this really powerful book called Transurfing, which is about shifting to different timelines that already exist, from a multidimensional perspective. Mm-hmm. All of it is happening past, present, future at the same time. So we have the power to shift into the one that's more aligned with our future vision. And we do that by saying that, the world works for me. Everything I do works out in perfect harmony. And then when something happens, you're like, this is exactly what is supposed to be happening for me because I'm right where I'm supposed to be. And it's subtle. It's a subtle shift. But it almost like shows the universe that you are in alignment with all the positive that's happening. And I feel like more doors open that way.
Trend shifting, it's called?
Trans surfing.
Can you even elaborate a little bit more on that? That's super interesting.
Yeah, it's really interesting. It's written by this Russian author named Vadim Zeland. And it's this idea of, it's a really long book and I'm just now getting to the end of it. But it talks about this idea of energy existing in the world, and there's pendulums, he calls them. And pendulums are any sort of energy form, whether you consider politics right or left. So if you contribute to the pendulum by saying, I am super right or I am super left, the pendulum as an entity is so happy because you're feeding it. It's almost like a vampire, right? It's feeding it. I need the energy to keep moving. So what you have to look through on your day-to-day basis and throughout life is, where are there issues happening, pendulums, conversations, all these, conversations about division, all these woke conversations, all these, questions about politics and what's happening with the environment. These are all pendulums, and to the extent that we play into them, we get sucked in, even if we feel we're on the right side of it, so we have to be conscious of where our energy is being directed. So that's one aspect of this whole Transurfing book. But the other is, essentially living your life and living through intentions that, there's some affirmations you do in the mirror to say, like, I am this new person, and you see this new person being reflected to you. That's a reflection of who, where you want to go and where you want to be. And you just feel and put yourself in a position where you're living the life, speaking in the present moment. Even alcohol is a bit of a pendulum. So it says, look, if you want to, to an extent that you do have a drink, that first one should be a toast, and a toast should be, you're sort of shifting the energy around, the alcohol and saying, I'm toasting to a current present thing that is happening to me right now that I'm grateful for, that is positive, so as opposed to mindlessly having a beer and just like letting it spiral into a bunch of, into, a depressive behavior, just really thinking and doing things consciously, when something good happens, I'm aware that the universe is working for me every day, and just you walking the walk and talking the talk. And it's really like, my partner and I talk about this as, we're just shifting timelines. Like some days, we have an experience and we're like, whoa, we just shifted the timeline because like something happens in a way where you feel like you're in a higher vibrational plane. And it's an ongoing and it's a daily process, and it's something that I'm conscious of and just more aware of every day. To even something like the minute something bad happens, you literally have it sink in, and you smile and you say, that was an amazing thing that just happened. I can't wait to see what the silver lining in that is. Oh wow, this connection just went bad. It went wonderfully bad, this internet connection today. And it's so amazing to see where that's going to take me today. It's just, and it's sometimes it's a second by second shift, depending on where your day is going. But it's really like, shifting, where attention goes, energy flows, right? So it's really, something that I've really enjoyed the book a lot, because I don't think I've ever read anything like it. It's one of the most highlighted books I've ever read on my Kindle. And as soon as I'm done reading it, I'm going to download the audiobook, and I'm just going to go through the audiobook again because it's really, really interesting and important. This idea of like, I'm a big fan of time travel movies and all this sort of stuff existing, multiple timelines. And I really feel like that's what, the universe is made of. And the more we explore quantum mechanics and, objects being in motion and still at the same time, depending on the observer. Like there's some stuff happening that we can't wrap our heads around, but I think energetically, if we feel into it, there are little things we can do to, shift into that energy.
How has your relationship with time evolved over time?
I think a couple of different ways to answer that would be to think less about this idea of running out of time or not doing things in a timely way. I'm 53 years old, and sometimes, you get into this mindset of saying, I should be somewhere different at this point in time. Or I should, have this amount of money at this point in time, or I should be living in a certain place by this point in time, or my family should look like this. And, this feeling into and being grateful for where I am in the present moment, and understanding and believing in my heart that I am exactly where I need to be right now in this moment in time. At every moment thinking I'm right where I'm supposed to be. I'm right where I'm supposed to be. And also playing into what I just talked about with like this idea of there's multiple versions of my life that have been played out, that are playing out in this moment. It's that scene in Interstellar, when he goes into the Tesseract and he's floating around towards the end of the movie, and he can see all the timelines, past, present, future, in one moment, and it's aligning yourself to that. And I really feel like that's how the universe works. So I know that whatever we consider like a higher version of time of me in a different timeline exists. I just need to align myself to shift into that. So it's not something that's out of my reach. It's something that's already happening as we're speaking right now. So, I'm always, fascinated by this idea that through my own intentions and through my own energy, slowly over time, we're not talking about jumping to, 10 years back or 10 years future, but sometimes, it's just like moving into a different path where now that becomes my future, and doing things like, I'm happy to be in the perfect relationship with this perfect woman who is the most beautiful woman I've ever seen, and I'm attracted to her every single day, and I'm living in a house that is my dream house, and just doing that. And some days are better than others depending on what happens with my personal life, my business, and my family, but it's something that I've been more conscious of, and just communicating that to people and communicating it in what I do and on a daily basis. So I believe this idea of time is malleable in terms of you can shift it to where you want it to be, and I think it's a conscious effort, and I think we're all capable of it.
Yeah, if I may say, low key, that biologically you've shifted timelines big time. 53, bro? You kidding me? You kidding me? Like honestly. Like you brought it up, man. I didn't ask you, but like you said it. But like this is crazy. Like you're looking 15 years younger than that.
Well, here's the thing, Maxi. I'm conscious wherever I'm speaking in public, or I'm speaking in like on a podcast, or I'm talking to people. I want to be comfortable in this idea of I am right where I'm supposed to be. I have no problem talking about my age. Whether I look my age or not. Definitely it's some days are better than others when you think about like I've lived 5 decades of life and where should I be right now. But I want, for whoever is listening, for whoever is 53 or 54 or 63 or 73, or maybe 43, just to really feel like, we all need to start, I've talked about this before. I read it in a book one time, or I saw it in a post, this idea of levels. So I'm at level 53 now. It's not a linear, time is linear, and I don't think that way. I think of time as multidimensional. So I'm at level 53, and I learn and I gain wisdom from someone who's at level 5 or level 15 or level 29 or level 72. Like it's just, we're all just, different at different levels, and we're learning different things. So that's why I make it a conscious effort to just, if we're talking, I just throw it in there because I want to be more comfortable sharing it. I want people who listen and watch this to be more comfortable, just being more comfortable in their own skin, because, we all know what's happening and what we see on social media, that it's not reality, and people are portraying women unfortunately feel they need to look a certain way by a certain age, and they start worrying when they see younger women on socials. And men do the same thing. We're in groups and where we gather with men, and you can't help. Your ego kicks in. You're like, look at this guy and look at this guy, and this guy's in shape, and this guy's very outgoing. Like this guy's younger, but he looks like he's more successful than I am. And so, I think it's a conscious thing that I do now and that I'm doing more, and it's an awareness that I have because I'm 53, but it's also just to have that comfort to just let's talk about where we are, but not in a way that's saying one is better than the other. It's just celebrating the level we're at currently.
Would you share with us a little bit about your journey to get there, to this level of awareness?
It's been a long journey. It's been a really long journey, obviously, from a linear perspective, obviously. But I think, when you think back and you think of some of the work that I've done through therapy, some of the support and guidance and work that we've done through the Sacred Sons community, it just peels layers away. I was born in El Salvador, so I was brought here to this country when I was a year old. And so I have that identity of like Latino, but because we were in America and I was raised in New York, my father wanted to make sure we spoke English, so we lost that opportunity to speak it in the household. I did speak it occasionally, with my mother, so I was able to maintain my language there. But it was obvious, when I went to Catholic school for my first and second grade, and then in third grade we moved to the house that we grew up in, and it was conscious. Like I remember walking into the third grade class. I'm a third grader at this point. I was probably 8 or 9, and realizing like I was the different person in the room. And so I think at some point it created some sort of shell around me, and it built up a lot of issues, I'm sure, that I had to work throughout the years, and just feeling like an outsider. And then slowly over time, I was really shy and really quiet growing up, and so. I had an older sister that passed away when I was probably 1.5. So energetically, I was present for when that happened, but I don't remember her. But you can imagine, like, your parents are grieving the loss of their daughter, So whatever that energy is, it affected me to the point where I avoid confrontation. And, obviously through sessions later on with my therapist, I realized, wow, I was being affected by that, and it carried through my adult life. So, and when you're growing up, you just do the things that you do as a male in your teens, and you just, like get into trouble and you connect with people that are popular and may not have your best interests at heart. And so I think I've become more aware of the types of relationships I built early on that probably, were not fulfilling me. They served their purpose at the time, but I think over the years, I wasn't able to develop a deep relationship. I didn't get to develop it on a deep level with my father. He was strict, so there was, that energy around there. But also I can only imagine, and through work I've done on myself, and actually through one of the sessions we had recently in Sacred Sons, I remember there was a session where we were doing some breathing and we were holding our hands up, and Hunter was guiding us, our leader in the group was guiding us to feel into what our father was going through at the time, and how he was feeling. And I just started crying, like tears, because I realized like he was doing the best he could. Like, he was in his 20s, and 30s. I can only imagine. I talk to people about this all the time. Like in my 20s and 30s, I had zero thought about leaving my country to go to another country where I don't speak the language, to start fresh and then eventually bring my family. So that's a big thing, and I think we write off immigrants as like, oh, they're just like trying to cross the border. But, it's a big decision to make, to uproot your life, in the hopes of something bigger. So, just kind of thinking about your question and how all these things have shaped and formed me. I think it's been a journey throughout the process. I was married when I was 35, and that lasted for about 13 years. And, wasn't, probably the best husband I could be, and learned some hard lessons along the way. And, just, faced with some things that I did that I wasn't proud of, but just becoming aware of it, this is important enough, for me. And so just continuing to do the work, and continuing to realize I needed to like do the work, and just, that was the call from Sacred Sons, last year, early last year, to realize there's something calling me to this. I'm looking at these photos on Instagram and I'm feeling very uncomfortable because I'm like, what are they doing? And I'm not sure I want to do that. And I'm not sure I can do that. But when the pull is so strong, that internal pull, that something needs to change, all these things start to fall into place. And, for me, it's an ongoing journey of introspection, of learning, of realizing, what it is that I don't know, but continuing to open my mind to lessons from everyone of all ages, from all places, from all sources, to ensure that I really feel, each day now as I live my life, that I can say with confidence that I'm living my best life. Like I'm in the best place possible, and taking care of my body and working out and just all these things that are ongoing things that I need to remind myself every day, because there's so many temptations, and, you just have to have this self-discipline to say, I want to make better choices, and I want to make better choices, now, better than ones I've made previously, and so it just feels like this school of life that I'm in. I had a session when I did ayahuasca many years ago, and I saw the moment that I selected my parents, and it was really this realization of myself as a soul looking down and saying, I had made this plan of like, I want to reincarnate on Earth, and this is the checklist. I picture me hanging out with my soul family and just like, hey, what are you doing? I'm going to go down to Earth. And you're like, whoa, like that's intense. Like that's, by the way, you're going to forget everything that happened here. I'm like, no, I'm cool with it. And then like, but what kind of life do you want? I'm like, oh, I just want like a family, and I'm probably picking like, my parents are going through a challenging marriage, or they're going to have a daughter that passes away, and they're going to have 2 siblings, and I'm going to go through a marriage, I'm going to get divorced, and this like list of things, and incarnated. And I feel like I selected the 2 people that would allow me to have that experience to expand my soul. And I'm always conscious of that every day, and that I'm here because I selected this life because I wanted to. And so I think of that all the time as well. And so every time I go through my ups and downs, I'm like, okay, I signed up for this. What's the lesson here?
What about free will then? Like, believe in that?
Yeah, totally free will. Like, yes, definitely free will, because I'm choosing to make decisions here. I don't think it's something that's pre-selected, like I literally mapped out every aspect of my life. I believe that I selected an experience, like almost like a pod, like this is the environment that I'm going to be placed in. And then what I do with that's where the free will comes in, and the decisions that I make, move me in that direction. But I don't think it's all predestined by any means. And I do, to my earlier conversation about shifting timelines, like I can choose, to decide if I want to, learn the lesson that I came here for. There could be part of me that decides I don't want to learn that lesson, and then I'll have to come back and learn it again. So it doesn't necessarily mean that because I chose this assignment that everything is going to fall perfectly into place. It's like, it gives me the groundwork for what I have to work with, and I do with it, what I'm capable of doing, and I think to the extent that I'm open to the signs that the universe is, paying attention and supporting me, what I've learned just through experience is the more I pay attention to the signs, the more the universe gives me more signs. I see that sign, whether it's like what they call the angel numbers, like 222 or 777, just like there's little things, there's little things that the universe can do to let you know, like, hey, you're on the right path, or this is the right person, or you watch something on TV, or someone says a word, and then like 2 hours later, someone else says the same word, and it's just like, well, it's like, that's so weird. Like we've all had these experiences where we laugh it off sometimes if we're not dialed in. We're like, oh, that's funny, what a coincidence. But I'm just more and more, I'm just like, I see it, okay. And then when you do that, it's just like more happens, and that's been my personal experience.
How would you describe your ability to set boundaries? How did that evolve?
How would you define boundaries, just in terms of like my personal
your ability
relationships?
To set them. Yeah. You mentioned that was something that you struggled with.
Yeah.
So I was wondering how that evolved.
I think when you're going through your development as a man, because we're men here talking as a man, just like, a lot of it is driven by outside influences, and I remember as a child playing, when you're a shy kid and you find a group of kids that, accept you into their friend group, or you find a best friend and you start hanging together, there could be someone has a stronger energy and decides, hey, let's go, get into this fight with this other group of kids, or let's go, bother this neighbor's house, or just little things like that. And I would feel like you're pulled in that energy, because you're like, I don't want to be ostracized. I don't want to feel like I'm the one that's not part of the cool kids group or whatever it is, because you work so hard to feel accepted, and it's ingrained, and it's human nature. It's this tribal thing. Like, you get kicked out of the tribe and you get ostracized, and you have to go like fend for yourself. And so there's something inside of you that's feeling that. And that happened in college, and I just got attracted and connected with, guys that, had a, strong alpha energy. But when you look at the way they treat women, or how they behave, or, how they live their life, you end up like being pulled into that world and behaving like that, and doing things like that. And then if you don't have a strong support group, when you come back and you talk about like meeting a girl, it's not out of like respect. It's about a conquest. It's about like, hey, did you sleep with her? Like, hey, did you hook up? And say, hey, what, and it's like, there's nothing about like, hey, have you been respectful to the woman, and did you honor her energy? These are things that we don't talk about if we're not in the right groups. And I think these boundaries have been helpful for me to decide, what are my values? What do I find important? How do I want to treat the people that I love? How do I want to come across in this world to people that are meeting me for the first time? And as someone who grew up in New York, you develop this shell around you. It's almost protective in a way, because you could be on a subway car with 100 people in the car and nobody is making eye contact. Everyone is just in their pods and in their little silos, and just like, you bump into people and it's a big deal. Like, hey, what's your problem? And so growing up in that energy, it's so interesting to come here to the Midwest and Minnesota and Midwest United States and feel there was an adjustment necessary. My partner's like, you don't smile. You don't smile at anyone. You don't talk to anyone. You don't say hi. Like, I would go to a restaurant and be like, Duran, party 2. She's like, you should like ask them how are you doing? But I didn't feel like I was doing.
You should be living in Germany.
Yeah. You fit right in, right? direct. But it's interesting because it's changed, and I've softened a lot being here. And I'll show up and be like, hey, how you doing? How's your day going? And we're all starving for connection. Humans are starving for connection, and we need that connection. We want that connection, and we feel like we have to have this armor on, and so I think in the beginning the boundaries are there because you're protecting yourself. It's self-preservation. But then you realize that you need to be more open-hearted, and obviously you have discernment. Is this person in alignment with me and my values? Do I open my heart up to this person? But this idea of discerning, like, when and where is the right opportunity for me to show my heart, And when I do show my heart and people reciprocate and they respond in kind and they show me their heart and we feel that connection, then, that's a sign they're on your right path. But if you show someone your heart and they don't respond, that's okay too. Just don't take it personally. That's something that I've learned as well, because I am very sensitive, and something would not go my way and I'd feel like they were against me. It could just be they're having a bad day. So I'm just like, well, let me put myself in their shoes. What could possibly be happening in their life for them to have that reaction towards me? And it's been helpful in partnership as well, because like, if my partner gets angry about something, immediately, like in the past, I'd get like defensive and be like, I put my shell up. But I'm trying to be more patient and say, hey, what could possibly have happened? What is she going through? And feeling empathy for how she's feeling, even though she's mad at me. Separate that. Don't take it personally. Don't feel like she's attacking me. She's just upset. Maybe and the energy is being, it's challenging because she's upset and the energy is being directed at me, but it may not be that she's mad at me. So,
Yep.
It's really just playing with boundaries in a way. And you have to be strong. Your core has to be strong. You have to. Your heart has to be strong. Your intentions have to be pure. You have to do the work to get to that place where you can make those judgments. Because if you're always stressed out, if you always feel like everyone's out to get you, then the universe will bring you what you ask for.
Yeah.
So if you constantly putting that energy out, you can't be surprised when the universe meets you with examples of that energy. So that's why it's really important for me to always be thankful, be grateful. If something bad happens, is like flip it around. What's the positive? What's the positive? What's the positive? And I think that's related to your question about boundaries, just kind of thinking about how I open them up in a way that shows that I'm more present and available to everyone I come in contact with.
Yep. Thanks for sharing.
Of course.
I feel like a child, honestly, when it comes to boundaries now at 30. Really, it's been I'm just starting to play around with that concept of boundaries. And I really also, it's really like you take a step and you decide, okay, I am more certain and aware of my boundaries and the ones that are, and the values that are behind them, because I know my values that leads me to say, this is definitely crossing a boundary of mine. And when that happens, I feel like really strongly now that it's a muscle I haven't trained yet.
Yeah.
I didn't learn.
Yeah.
Because honestly, my default setting is not to do it, because at the cost of a potential loss of a connection, because when I am speaking about my values and my truth, that could potentially set something into movement that is completely getting out of my control, and the person will leave me, and so that whole story. And that is something that I'm like, okay, I've exercised it a couple of times now, and it's funny what happens is like let me think about it. Was 4 to 5 different conversations I had where I would say, I stood up for myself and I established boundaries, and I would really say all of them deepened. All of those connections deepened after I did that. Prior to that, I was strongly believing that as soon as I do that, would be over, game over. Yeah. So, and I would have potentially be fine with that too, although it would be hard, but okay. Now only to find out, oh wow, that is such a, it's like pouring oil in the fire. It's just like wow. And both can bring all of us, it's just like I'm facilitating a space where we're talking, now we're like, okay. We're being honest with each other, and that's beautiful.
And I think also to that point, when you do that, you give the other person permission to decide what it is they stand for, because they could just be repeating what they've heard, and they are likely in the same boat that you are, and they're just doing and saying the things that put them in the best light possible, and so you want to say, is that something that you really believe? Why do you believe that? Where did you learn that? Or, who did you learn that from? And this idea of, we don't necessarily have to end up in a point where we all agree with each other. That's not the point. I think this idea of sovereignty has been really top of mind for me for the past, 3 or 4 years. Being a sovereign individual, meaning, you have agency over your life, you have control over your life, and you decide what's the life you want to lead, who you want to be with. There's a saying in Spanish that says, dime con quién andes y yo te digo quién eres. Like, tell me who you're with and I'll tell you who you are. And I'm sure every culture has a version of that, right? Yeah. And so, you think about that, and to your point about speaking up and fear of speaking up and to avoid, either the confrontation. It's a muscle, it's something you have to practice and something you can do on a smaller scale. But I think, what you were alluding to is the fact that, when you do it, you feel better. You feel like lifted, your heart feels lifted. Like you stood up for yourself. Like the little boy inside you is just like, yes, Maxi, you did it. Like, that's how I feel sometimes. I've got to, talk to my inner child and be like, hey, I know that in the past you were afraid, but now I've got your back. And we'll figure this out together. And, sometimes I do those, I think about those and I start crying because I virtually feel myself like hugging my 10-year-old self. It's like, fuck, I'm so sorry, man. Like, I'm sorry you had to go through this because you didn't know any better. And, we all have that inner child inside of us that needs, that reassurance. It's that's where the kind of the multidimensional timeline stuff comes in, because I feel actively like I'm connecting in that moment with, me, at 10 years old. And I picture like specific moments. I'm in a park in a specific place and I'm like having a bad day. And I'm just like, well, and so like, it's powerful. It's powerful stuff, man, when you really sit with it.
Yeah. That makes me think of Super G's advice. He told me about communicating with my inner child. And he's like, ask a question, write it down with your right hand to your inner child, put the finger into the left hand. If you usually write with your right hand and you put it into the left, and then you have it answer in like using your left hand, and it'll answer you. I love that. And bro, like I did that. Like it's mesmerizing. Like I'm sure there will be some neuroscientific explanation behind this. Sure. Brain, whatever, so the circuits are activated and whatnot. Okay. But yeah, it's there. Like the information is there, and there's some part of us is listening. And that's why I also like what you said about in the future. So for like you also, so you communicate, you're healing parts from the past by doing that. And then at the same time, you're able to speak to your future self and embody it already, right? You're like, I'm already that man. Yeah. And ooh.
That would give me chills. That's a powerful exercise. Yeah, I'll try that one.
Yeah, do it. Yeah, it's good. It's really good. All right. I wanted to speak to you about the learnings, everything that podcasting brought into your life. Because this is obviously something that I'm personally very interested in. And I have experiences with it, but you have more experience and different experience. So how did podcasting influence your life? And what does it, or does and did it introduce into your life? Psst, hey, this is just going to be a very brief reminder. If you enjoyed this episode thus far, you can do me an enormous favor and give me 15 seconds of your valuable time. Go to your podcast app right now. And if you enjoyed it, give Going Out Looking in a 5-star rating. And while you're at it, hit that follow button and that bell icon to be notified whenever a new episode is being uploaded. Thank you so much for your support, and let's go straight into the episode.
I think it's one of the most transformational things I've ever done in my life. If you think about all the repercussions that have come, repercussions, I don't know if there's a negative connotation to that word, or all the ripple effects that have happened. Because if I think back to when I started, I was in the corporate life for 20 plus years. I was in the cubicle. I was the 9-to-5 guy, but I always had this entrepreneurial pull here and there. My original passion is actually DJing, house music. I grew up DJing on vinyl, turntables. I still have my turntables. I'm excited to be setting them up in my house here. So it's a true passion of mine in a way that lights up my heart. That it's hard to explain. Like when I'm DJing, and there's a crowd dancing in front of me, and I'm working with the crowd, and I'm moving with that energy. It's nothing better for me. And then the only other thing better is to be on the dance floor actually dancing as well, because I really feel that. And I think about that because when I was like 15 or 16, going to these like community parties, and I would see the DJ, and I said, this person, whatever he's doing, is moving the energy of the people on the dance floor. And as he would play the appropriate song, you could feel like everyone on the dance floor, whoa, like, or it's not a good song, the energy drops and people stop dancing, and it was like, whoa, it's fascinating. So that's been always like super, I was a big part of my life, and it continues to be. And so I thought about starting a podcast to interview DJs. That was the initial start in 2012, and so I worked with a friend. We were working on a mobile app actually prior to that with a friend of mine called Know Your DJ. Fun fact, .dj is the domain for the country of Djibouti in Africa. So it was know your .dj. So we had a really cool domain name. We built an app, mobile app, and it was like a social app. It had all the socials. You could swipe through. So it was almost like Pandora, but just for electronic music. Because I would go to these festivals with my ex and our friends, and we would see the DJs, and I was like, which DJ is this? I know his music, but I don't know his face. And so we built an app for this. So then I said, let me create a podcast to interview DJs. There's a show called Resident Advisor. That's a very popular podcast, been running for many years. And I wanted to emulate that. But also, adding all these layers to me and my personality. I studied acting when I was in New York. When I used to live in New York, I studied acting for 3 years. And so I remember this show called Inside the Actor Studio, hosted by this guy named James Lipton. And he would have an actor on for an hour. And it was fascinating. This is, we're talking about like the 90s or in the late 80s, 90s. And so you would see a famous actor not acting, talking. He would be like, oh, this is what I did with the movie, and this is my favorite, my dog's name is this, and blah, blah. And I was like, this is so cool. Like, we actually get to hear. And so the DJ world, I was listening to these DJs talk for an hour, I was thinking about this show, and I said, I went to this conference called New Media Expo in 2014, in January 2014 in Las Vegas, and it was bloggers, YouTubers, and podcasters. So I said, oh, I want to learn about this stuff. And I go there, and there's all these podcasters talking about podcasting. And then I really quickly realized, like someone in one of the breakout sessions says, who here is a podcast junkie? And I'm like, oh, I am. Like, I looked at my app. I had like 30 podcasts. I was like, I'm a podcast junkie. And I was like, oh, that name is cool. So registered the domain, podcastjunkies.com. And I said, forget the DJs. That's going to be so hard. Imagine trying to interview globe-trotting DJs. Like, hey, after your set in Ibiza, can we have a chat? Like, that's not going to happen. So I said, let me interview podcasters. They have good mics already. They're comfortable talking. So that's how Podcast Junkies was born in 2014. And so it's been running, as we speak in March of 2024, next month in April, it'll be my 10-year anniversary of podcasting. And so it was challenging. I mean, in the beginning, you learn from other people who have done it before you. So I had my list of questions, and I'm like, oh, like, what's your spirit animal? What's your favorite fruit? There's all these, you try to fill up time, and you're trying to get through, and then you have your questions.
I still want to know what's your favorite fruit, bro.
Mango, but So then you realize, I had one conversation with a guy who was super busy. He was like this guy named John Lee Dumas, entrepreneur on fire. He only gives you like 30 minutes. And I remember, I don't have time to like go through these questions. Let's just talk. And then I was like, wow, this is really good. We just had a conversation. And I said, forget the paper. I just want to talk to people. And that's how over time I started listening to other podcast interview shows, and I was listening to what worked and what I liked as a listener. And I realized conversations, real conversations, genuine conversations, not formulaic, back and forth, question and answer. And it really helped me to learn how to be more curious, how to be a better listener, to be, we've talked about this, to be comfortable with silence. When you ask someone a tough question, you can just close your mouth and let's see what happens. Mm-hmm. So, all these skill sets really helped. And then as my job was winding down, the writing was on the wall that this was not going to work out. I was like, oh man, this is crazy. Like I need to work on something. So I started learning that everything that I was doing with Podcast Junkies, I could sell as a service. So I had hired a business coach. I was in this high-end mastermind. I was paying this coach $1,500 a month to like train me and be in this group. And it was a big investment. But I realized the people in that group were the people that I could be potential clients. And there's a saying by a famous speaker named Jim Rohn. He says, you are the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. And so in that moment, I realized I had been in a 9-to-5 cubicle life. I wasn't going to learn anything that I needed to learn as an entrepreneur. I needed to be in the position where these people had 7-figure, 6-figure, 7-figure businesses. And it was really intimidating because I was like swimming in the deep end. I was like, whoa, I'm so out of my league here. Like, how this guy was like, oh, I just made $30,000 this month. And I was like, how is that even possible? I was just like, my mind was blown. Like, I call it my digital Narnia. Like, I went in, I was like, what world is this that people live in? But, over time, you start learning, speaking their language and learning how to like live in that world. And I was like, oh, I could add value to these people. They're paying this coach. They understand opportunity cost, what an hour of their time is worth. They don't want to be doing that work. They want the shortcut. And so I was like, I'll give them the podcast shortcut. And that's how my agency was born, Fullcast. And I've launched over 120 shows since 2015 for our clients. And so it's kind of just set me off in this world. I met my partner my current partner at a podcast conference. And that gets a little tricky because we were both married at the time. So
oh wow,
there was a lot that needed to happen. It took about 2 years for that to unravel. And part of what I alluded to earlier, like in terms of like, I would have done things differently had I been a more mature and better person. But that's, so it's all related to podcasting. And then I started the second show in 2020 where I interview CEOs of vertical farming companies because I was interested in that topic, and that's been very successful. And that's taken me to Dubai and Germany, and just all these doors that have been opened up. I've spoken at podcasting conferences, and what I realized over the years is this idea of like finding your voice, finding my own voice. And this is what podcasting has done. And this is what we talk about with clients and students. Everyone, has got a story to share. Like if I think and then look back at my previous history, throughout my entire life, I've been sort of like maybe a follower and not necessarily like not having the confidence to take the leadership position. So, in the beginning, I would listen. The first voice is my father, right? He's like, go to college. You got to go to college, get a good degree. And I did the best I could. I didn't graduate college, So he was the voice I was listening to. And then when you leave your house, my first boss became like my corporate godfather, and he was like, helping me move up in the ranks. And I got my 6-figure salary, and I was like, this is great. And then at some point, I was like, I want to try something different. And so the .com phase came in, and a friend of mine convinced me to leave my paying job, cash out my 401k, my retirement plan, and go take a job where I was getting zero pay to become operations manager for a .com. Obviously, we'd probably be having a different conversation if that had succeeded. It did not. So, I had to go back into my corporate godfather and be like, hey, can you get me a job again? And he did, But then that kept moving. And then after 9/11, I was living in New York at the time. I connected with my half brother in Atlanta, and he said, come work with me. I work in construction. I'm in marketing. He's like, come work with me in construction. I was like, sure. So I moved to Atlanta. We're talking hard hat, boots, reading blueprints, like to do takeoffs of like, he owned a masonry company. I was just like, yeah, I can do this, and I'll be your. But you can see the trend there. Like I was just kind of like following, just the coattails in the States. That's the phrase. You ride the coattails of this person. That didn't work out with my half brother because it's what they say about working with family. Like 2 years later, I had to come back to New York with my tail between my legs to go live with my parents again at 34. Like it was like,
yeah, man.
I'm not following and I'm listening to. And I remember I had a ticket to Thailand, and I had some guy that I had met a couple of years ago previously in Amsterdam. He's like, come over, go to Koh Samui. My parents own a house there. And I was like, yes, I've got no job, but I can go to Thailand. I got a ticket. So I go to Thailand. I land. We're driving around. I don't know if you've been, but it's just a fun, magical place. It's like an extreme sensory overload, because if you're living in like America, or you've only been to countries where it's like the Romance languages, French language, French, Spanish, Italian, Portuguese, you hit Thailand and you hear people speaking Thai, and you go into some of these stores and you're just like, whoa, this is like another planet. It's so crazy. We did a hike and we go up to this mountain, and he's on this ridge and he's looking like into the valley. He's like, come over here. The view is amazing. And I was like, okay. So I step over to where he is, but there was like a little stream below me, and I put my foot in the stream, and I stepped on these rocks that were so slippery. I was barefoot, and both legs go up in the air, and I land on my back, and I proceed to just be carried like a paper boat in a little water over to the edge of the fall. I'm like being carried over the edge of the waterfall. This is so fast. This is happening within seconds, and I feel myself like completely have no control over my body being carried because I'm on my back. And then there's a big boulder, a big rock on the left bank. And just instinctually, I stick out my left foot and I stop myself from going over, you know. I don't know if I would have died, but it would have been very like bad. I would have been like in Thailand, crashed into a bunch of rocks, bleeding for the next 4 or 5 hours. Like it wouldn't have been good, you know. And my friend was like white, pale. He's like, pulls me up. He's like, whoa. And, you know, we caught our breath. We enjoyed the rest of the day. I enjoyed the rest of the trip. And then I'm back home and I'm thinking about like, whoa, that was crazy. So over the years, I think about these experiences that happen, and I think about this idea of finding your voice. And I remember being, you know, back in New York, and I was like, wow, what a shame it would have been if I had died with my voice inside me. I was like, oh man, you know, so I really feel like, you know, there's moments in life, I don't know how many people get to go through a moment where you feel like you're going to die, you know, and for me, I look back and I laugh it off sometimes, but I'm like, no, that was real. Like I was probably close to dying in that moment. And so I'm constantly reminding myself in that moment, you know, when I'm thinking about podcasting, when I'm thinking about saying what's inside, like, I don't want to leave here with like things unsaid. I don't want to leave here with like a voice inside me. And I tell people, and when I'm on stage and when I'm on a podcast, I'm just like, everyone that's watching this, everyone that's listening to this right now, you have a voice inside you that needs to be heard. You know, and so don't wait, you know, the 30 years that I did, the 40 years, whatever it is, to find that voice. Just get out there, whether it's blogging or writing or a podcast or a YouTube clip or Instagram, whatever. Just like use these platforms that are at our disposal to share your story, because I guarantee you 100% there's someone that needs to hear your story. You know, you think like we think our stories are insignificant, or what do I have to say, or what do I have to share? You don't know who's listening. I get affirmations all the time. I just published a newsletter. It was supposed to be a weekly newsletter. I haven't published it in like almost 2 months. And someone on the Substack made a comment. This was exactly what I needed to hear at this moment right now. I've never heard of this person before. I didn't even know who they are. They'd subscribed to my newsletter, and they said that. And I was like, whew, it's so humbling, because we need to get out of our own way. You know, it's our ego that's telling us, oh, I got an insignificant story. No one cares about me or this life that I live. No one to care that I'm talking about the deer in like Minnesota, or about being 53, or about like starting a podcast, or like traveling the world. Like, you don't know which piece of that story is relevant for someone that needs to hear it at the time. And we're all learning. Like, I'm learning from people who are one rung on the ladder ahead of me, and I'm helping just the person who's one rung below me. I'm not trying to like be Oprah, and I'm not trying to help someone who's like doesn't know like anything about like starting a business, and who's like in their 9-to-5 job or something. You know, I may not be able to help them in anything, but there's a core group and it keeps changing, because as you learn more, then you just share your lessons. And I think that's what we should all be doing. If you know, just share our lessons in life, you know, because like I said, you know, it sounds like a broken record, but it's just like, you never know. You just never know. And I think there's so many people out there that are seeing this fake world of like influencers and people posting their best selves online, and they're getting discouraged, and then, you know, they're feeling like depressed and potentially suicidal or something like that. And I'm just like, look, we've seen it. We experienced and had conversations with brothers, you know, at Sacred Sons, who had attempted suicide, you know, weeks or months before showing up. Like, people are struggling, you know, with life, you know, and I'm not saying we all have the answers, you know, but we have the answers for the people that need to hear what we have to say. We just don't know who they are. So, you know, let's, you know, get out of our own way and share our stories.
Yeah. Thanks for sharing that. So much in there. Oh my God. Wow. Yeah. I'm feeling into like what kind of thread I want to pick up on, and also be somewhat aware of time. Because now I'm really like, I would so much like to like pick your brain on like many things podcasting and being, but like podcast, I mean, what the fuck, like podcasting, it's just like, yeah, like become better at being human in interaction with other humans, you know, because like I feel I'm getting self-conscious even now after 50 episodes sometimes in conversations. Like I don't know how that is for you. And like I'm also like, because you said like you found your voice, and like for me I translated that to like you are more yourself, like when you are, you know, in front of a microphone, and like even though you press a record button you still feel comfortable within your own skin and all of that. But there is still like some sort of like podcast personality that I feel like, or like a hat that I'm wearing as soon as I go into the podcasting. Like I'm still, and it will shift from person to person, but I'm still like I am aware of it being recorded right now.
Sure,
like,
sure.
I don't know how.
But it's an interesting skill set that gets better over time, and it's one of those things that it's literally like a repetition thing, right? I always tell people your 10th is going to sound better than your first, your 50th is going to sound better than your 10th, your 100th is going to sound better than your 50th. You won't get there until you record that first awful sounding one where you don't like the sound of your voice. And almost every podcaster I've spoken to or worked with does not like the sound of their recorded voice when they hear it for the first time. They're like, that's what I sound like, because we're hearing the vibrations of our own voice in our head, right? But when you project it out and you hear it played back to you, you're like, oh, that's different, because we're not hearing it through the same channel, right? So, and then speaking to your point of being conscious, I'm aware when conversations are not going well, and when I think back why, part of it may be sometimes because I'm not focused on just the guest. Like as you're speaking, I'm like, and it's a lot challenging. Like I have two monitors here. Sometimes I have to minimize windows because it's like outside distractions. You got to turn things off because it's the shiny object syndrome. But I'm focused on you as if you were in that same room with me. And literally, you're the most important person in the world to me right now. And I'm not saying I'm always perfect when I do it, because if you look at some of these Instagram reels that I share of me and my guests, and it's the two of us on the screen, it's like the guest is speaking and my eyes are going like this, or I'm looking down and I'm like, you could see the visual representation that I'm not paying attention, because, and I'm aware of that, and I'm like, oh, I need to be better at that. And so how do I be better at that? I'm just focused on I think about like everything you're saying, and I'm like, oh, why did he say that word? Or why is he like feeling nervous in this moment? Or what is it that's having him feel self-conscious? Like, and he's nodding his head, so he must feel like he agrees with me right now. And why is that right now? And what did I just say that's so funny? Like, you literally like really like you be curious. You be curious about like, where is Maxi in this moment now, having this conversation with me? What is he feeling? I sense a bit of insecurity, because he's bringing up this topic, because he's aware that we're having this conversation that people are listening to and watching. And so there's an aspect of maybe your ego where you're just like, I want to look good. We all, it happens to all of us. And, even if you can't edit it later, you feel like, I want to show myself as the best version of myself. But one of my mantras early on with Podcast Junkies was treat your guests like gold. And I do that in the way of like how I engage with them, how they sign up, and how I promote their episodes. But also, again, it gets better and better. And when they're having that one-on-one conversation with me, I want to make them feel like they made the right choice by deciding to come on my show. Like they made the right choice to decide, like whether they found me by accident or whether they've been listening to this show or someone recommended them. Like, I want to make sure that in this, it's the least I could do, that in this time that we have together, that I could make them feel like the most important person in the world, and take a genuine interest in them as a human being, not as someone who's coming on to sell something or promote something. That's why I like to go deep. That's why I like to say, hey, you had the experience coming on the show, and I really like, sometimes it's almost podcast therapy, right? Because it's like, I know as a podcaster what we try to do and what we're trying to portray and how we're trying to show the world that we're in control. And, it's the duck on the pond looking very calm on the top, and underneath the legs are moving like crazy because that's what's happening in the podcast space. We're sitting here in our boxer shorts with our nice top on, just like, and it's like, business on top, party down below, but they, the Zoom outfit we have on, but we only see this space. The viewer only sees this space. You only see the space. I only see what you have, and so you don't know what's the desk all these papers I have, and all these receipts I need to take care of, and all this tissue that I have that I just blew my nose in, and just like cup that I'm drinking from, and just like all these Post-it notes that are sitting on my laptop. But no, you don't see that because I'm like, okay, this is my world, like you can see here, and so it's just understanding that that's reality, and that's why I like having these conversations, because I want to remind the viewer and the listener, what you see portrayed is our best attempt at trying to show you like things are calm, I'm in control, like I know what I'm doing. But the reality is like we do our best, but the way we can control those things as a podcaster is like make the focus about my guest, like listen intently, pull threads. Oh, why did he say that? Because the listener is listening. We've talked about this as well. There's 3 people in this conversation right now. There's you, there's me, and then there's the listener or the viewer, depending how they're consuming this. And so I'm conscious as you, the listener and the viewer watching this, you're also thinking about how this relates to you in this conversation. And whenever we talked about Super G. Super G is a co-leader in this group, Sacred Sons, that Maxie has probably referenced in podcast episodes before, but in case you're wondering who he's referring to. So I'm always conscious of like making sure it feels like our viewer listener has pulled up the bar stool next to us as we're sitting there in the bar having a conversation and just listening in, and I want them to feel included. And so those dynamics are always at work for me. Like I want you to feel like the most important person in the world, and I want to remember that our conversation needs to feel like the most important thing in the world to whoever is taking their time. I'm as respectful as I am of my guest's time or my host's time for inviting me on the show. I'm just as respectful of like anyone who's going to take time to listen to this hour plus conversation, like that's like we're so much going on in this world right now. The fact that people take the time to do this is like still mind blowing. And then just like, I don't want to take that for granted. So when you put all those pieces together, that's how you sort of, that's where you direct your energy. And, and if you do that, then it helps to sort of let the other things just like go by the wayside. That other shit is not important. Like, like how I look or how I'm perceived it's not important because it's just, you and me. And that's the focus.
Yeah. Thanks for that. That was also a lot in there. I really do believe like, the podcast did a little bit of its own thing. It started as me just recording myself as an audio diary outside, going out, looking in. And then it turned into an interview podcast. And now it's so funny that you said that because I don't want to see my guest as a representative for a subject and don't see them as as an individual with a story. So it's not like, okay, this is this person and he is an expert on XYZ. And so naturally where I saw the podcast going is like a little bit in that direction. So like this was like, so this is the expert around yoga. All right. So I'm talking to this person about yoga, but like, who is this person talking about yoga? And I mean, I get, that some people also feel way more comfortable with sharing about a topic rather than about themselves. But like, I feel more interested in really investigating the story and therefore the wisdom. Like there will be so much wisdom, like you say, there will be so much wisdom in those conversations around subjects that are present in the people's lives, So I want to move a little bit more into that. And Okay, yeah. Looking at time.
No worries. The other thing to just build upon that is interesting because there's this idea of the 5 whys. There's all these little things you can use to kind of dig a little deeper. And I heard it once explained. The 5 whys is when someone gives you an answer, you ask them, okay, why is that? And then they'll give you another answer, and you're like, okay, but why is that? and then they answer, and then you get to about 4 or 5 whys, then you find the real why, because they'll just give you the first one, and then but they're waiting to see if you're going to push back. If that answer suffices you and you're happy with the surface answer, then you won't go any deeper. But if you feel like they're just giving you like the stock answer or the typical answer, they're like, but why did you do that? Why did you think like that? And then the other thing, I read a book called Clear Thinking by an author named Shane Parrish. He writes a blog called Farnham Street, which helps me, it's really kind of like this first principles thinking. And it's this concept of when you speak to a subject matter expert, rather than having them explain to you, how something was done, have them explain to you the thinking process for how they arrived at the decision to do that thing, which unveils like another level of thinking. Because they'll just say, I did this because it was important. And I'm like, so I haven't been able to apply it yet, but it's saying, like, if someone gives you an answer like that, you're saying, how did you get to that point where you made that decision? Like, what thinking processes did you use, or mental models did you use to arrive at that decision? And then they'll start to it's going beyond what they think. Then they start to tell you how they think. Mm-hmm. And that is really, really fascinating when that starts to happen.
Do you have other questions that you really, really like to ask people?
I have a couple at the end of my podcast. I ask people, what's the most misunderstood thing about you? And it's an interesting one because it makes people look at themselves from the outside and see an aspect of themselves. I don't always get a really fascinating answer. Sometimes it's like, like a lot of people say like, people think I'm extroverted, but I'm introverted. That's been like 80% of the answers. Like a lot of people give that answer, especially from a podcast perspective, because we portray this image as podcasters, like we're outgoing, we're extroverted. And in reality, like a lot of these, people that I speak to are just I'm fairly introverted. Like, if I'm in a specific setting, and as we got to see, like I can have fun, but sometimes like I go back in my shell, I'm like, okay, I need to like, regenerate some energy here. And then the other question I ask is, what's something you've changed your mind about recently?
Yeah, I remember you asking me those questions. And I actually said that fucking thing about being extroverted, man. I said that,
man. It's true, yeah. It's common.
Introverted, extrovert. That's what I said, I think.
Yeah.
Oh, man. Well, that being said...
What's most alive for you right now?
Right now? Some sort of like relief. I don't know. It just feels good to know that you know how it is to be in this seat. Like, and not just know as somebody who had a conversation once, but the whole shebang about it. And yeah. And then like, I don't know, like honestly, I feel like, for example, Joe Rogan is, for example, for me, someone who is just really, 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 really close to like having I don't know. I don't feel like he's super aware of doing a podcast when he does. Although he might be super aware of it at the same time. Yeah. But for me as a listener, it seems so intuitive, like his... Yeah. It doesn't mean that like I'm resonating a lot with some of his guests or whatever, but the way that he's just like showing up, that's what I really respect.
It's no bullshit. It's genuine. He started on YouTube and he was just wanted to talk to his friends. And one of his early comic friends, I think it was Ari Shafir, when these first started going on YouTube, they were like 3 hours. He's like, bro, it's 3 hours. No one's going to listen through 3 hours of you talking and just bullshitting. Like, you got to shorten that down. He's like, no, I don't want to do it. Like, I'm having fun. I'm talking to people I like. And you notice the trend, like the consistency that you notice with Joe Rogan is he just talks to people he wants to talk to. He's not having, if he has someone on that's famous, is because he wants to like pick their brain. If he wants to talk about a guy about archery, he'll talk about archery for 3 hours.
Yeah.
A hunter for 3 hours, like a woman about bumblebees for like 3 hours. Like he's just, whatever you think about the perception of what his politics are, and I think he's pretty upfront about it. Anyone who writes him off or just saying he's like an ignorant guy or he's racist or like, you haven't listened to his show. Like I've gotten so much wisdom from the conversations of his guests because he lets them talk, and sometimes he plays the dumb guy and he's like, I don't know what the fuck you're talking about, but I just like I love like hearing and learning, and it's just like it's that beginner's mind, like knowing you don't know and admitting you don't know and not trying to put up a front and just having conversations with people you enjoy talking to. Like I always say, like if you look on the calendar and you've got an upcoming podcast conversation and you're not excited, you're probably not talking to the right people, because if it feels like a routine and just like, oh, I got an interview coming up, and I'm conscious of it, there's been a couple times I'm like, wait, what's this person? What am I talking about? But I think, if I do a little bit of homework and I get excited, I get on, I'm like, whoa, that was fun. Like you should feel energized after a conversation, not drained. That's, and some people do it as a job and they feel like I got to, get these famous people on and all these top names and all these authors, blah, blah, blah. And like, you're just doing it for the wrong reasons. You're trying to like tick off all the boxes of the famous people that you want to be associated with, as opposed to just like having conversations with people that you enjoy having conversations with.
Who were the most like significant episodes that you did?
I would say, it's something it's a very common question for podcasters, and I think about the conversations I've had, and I've had like friends of the podcasting space on, like, Jordan Harbinger and Pat Flynn, and people that are, prominent, that are prominent in the podcasting space. But it's interesting, I talk to people that nobody knows about, because they have a podcast, and they've reached out to me because, a lot of times recently now people are like, hey, I've heard the show, would you consider having me on? I've been listening to the show. I'm like, yes, absolutely. I don't know who you are, but I know that you're a podcaster, and I know that you've listened to my show. And I'm like, that's enough for me to just be like 1,000% grateful that someone is listening to my show. And it just always, because they come on and they're so excited. They're like, oh my God, I'm having the Podcast Junkies experience. I'm so I'm so excited, so happy, and it's very humbling, and never let that go to my head. And I'm just like, I'm excited, you're excited. Let's have fun, and then I learn about a person that I've never heard about, and they share their lives and how they got into podcasting. And lately, it's almost taken the flavor of podcast therapy, because inevitably, like I'll start, poking and prodding and be like, oh, like, how'd you grow up and what was your childhood like? And they're like, whoa, we're going there. I'm like, yeah, let's go. but it's so funny because I'll get an email like a couple of weeks later and be like, hey, Harry, I just want to let you know that we were talking about my childhood friend that passed away, or my high school friend that passed away. And, it happened years ago, but he's like, I just realized until I was on your show and this episode was published, that I've never really spoken about it in public in a way that like was honoring him. And I just listened back to the episode and that happened, and I just want to say thank you, and I was like, that's amazing. Like, that's so cool. So I'm just trying to make, the short answer is that the best conversation I had was the one is this one. And then the next best one as far as my show, it would be like the one I just had, because I just want to make it feel like I don't feel like anyone is more important than the next person. Whoever I just gave my attention to and whoever shared their story, that was important for them. And it's reducing this like hierarchy of like who's most visible or who's the best guest, because if you treat every conversation as if it's the most important guest in the world, that's where the magic happens.
What are you proud of?
I'm proud of recognizing where there's opportunities for me to grow as a man, as a brother, as a person. And also, and proud is a challenging word because there's some, it seems like an ego connotation involved with it. But there is time to celebrate. You have to look back and you have to celebrate your wins, because we all can figure out the things that we fucked up and the things that we didn't do wrong. And like, I messed up this, or I did something wrong, or I said the wrong thing to my partner, or I haven't called my parents in like 3 weeks, and like, I'm watching this show and the guy's talking to his mom, and I'm like tearing up, and I'm like, oh my God, I gotta call my I'm aware of all the places where I'm not showing up properly. So, but I am, if that's the word proud, but I am, I'm glad that I'm able to recognize the things that I need to improve on. I'm glad when I get triggered by a conversation where I feel my ego coming on strong, and I'm like, okay, I can react differently in this point, So I'm proud of that I'm making progress. I'm proud that I'm going to therapy and I'm talking to I'm proud that I'm going, to Sacred Sons and seeing where my faults are and seeing where I've fallen down before. And so I'm happy that I'm doing the work, and I'm happy that I'm proud that I'm going to be doing more work, and there's more work that needs to be done. So just, I think to answer that question, I'm just proud that I know where my faults are and where I need to do more work, and that I'm doing the work.
Proud of you too, man. Very proud of you do the work and you show up.
You too, brother. Yeah. I know that this is challenging. Men's work is challenging because there's a lot of lone wolf energy out there, and even I go through moments where I don't feel like I want to be a bother. And this is related to that earlier conversation about like issues with my parents, my sister passing away, and that energy about avoiding confrontation. I don't like bothering people. And so like there's brothers that I wanted to connect with, and then the ego kicks in. Well, they haven't reached out to me, so why should I reach out to them? And so all these things are at play. And so I'm glad for like seeing examples of men showing up like you show up, like you've shown up in our group. You've worn your heart in your sleeve. I've seen the stuff that you've gone through, the ups and downs, and you could have gone into a cave and just hide and be like, I had my experience with Sacred Sons, but now I'm going through shit, so I'm going to fix it out. I'm going to do it on my own, or I can figure this out. And this is just important to talk about this stuff, and I think wearing your heart in your sleeve when you feel like you're in a safe container, like we have with the brotherhood, like we have in this conversation. It's really important because we have to be able to be comfortable with talking about hard shit and we have to raise our hand and ask for help if we need help, and know that maybe sometimes no one's going to come to help us. That's a reality, right? We could say I need help, and it could be crickets, like no one's going to say anything. But we've got to find a path to getting it out, because it's not healthy. I mean, I've been through waves since we've connected, and just like where I'm just like, oh, like everything's fucking like not working, and I don't want to put this weight on my partner, like, because it's too much. I had a moment like that when we were together, just like it all came together. Like I felt like I had nowhere to turn, and I felt the pressure of that, and the brotherhoods were there for me, and you guys supported me, and I will never forget that experience for the rest of my life. Just to be supported in those few minutes by you guys was like so powerful. Like I'm getting emotional thinking about it now. Like, and we all need that. We all need that, and we all need to be aware where other men are looking and needing that help. And that's why I'm so excited to like continue to do the work locally, and I'll be back for another convergence or another event. And just like it's a lifelong process for me at this point. There's never going to be a moment where I'm not going to keep doing the work. And so I applaud you for these conversations and for asking tough questions, and for going deep, and for letting other people hear what we're all going through, to remind them that they're not alone. And continue doing what you do, wearing your heart on your sleeve, because I applaud you, and I know it's not easy, and you don't always get the answers you're looking for, but I think sometimes just asking them is a positive first step.
Thanks, bro. Thank you. Yeah.
I love you, bro.
I love you.
And it may sound strange to say, like we didn't know each other existed, 6 months ago. And then when people hear or watch these conversations, they're like, is that real? Like, do they really love each other? And I think so much happened so fast in that container for us that I could see very clearly where your heart was. And I'm an open-hearted person, so when you find that chemistry, it's like they lock together, and just like, oh, okay, we're simpatico. I know I can be open and vulnerable. I can cry, and I will be supported, 100% by you. And I know that you feel the same way about our container and about me. And, it's hard to explain to people when you're like, that you feel this love for another human being so quickly and so powerfully, but it's real. It's real if you allow it to be real.
Yeah. To me, it has so much to do with trust. That's like the thing. Like, I actually only trust men, especially nowadays, who are willing to go with me there. Fully trust.
Yeah.
Fully trust.
Yeah.
And I make it somewhat of a requirement to at least, for me to be able to ask certain questions and to explore something and then see what the other one does with it. But if I feel like a very strong resistance and a hideaway and stuff, like I'm getting like, yeah, it's difficult for me to fully trust then.
Sure. Yeah.
All right. I trust you. I trust your I trust your schedule, bro. I know you got places to be. Thank you. Thank you for coming on.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing space and time with me.
Likewise, brother.
And
I appreciate the invite. I appreciate the opportunity to slow down. Sometimes I'm like in the middle of the week and I'm wrapping up my Friday. Typically Fridays, I try not to put anything on my calendar because I'm like, I take all my calls on Tuesday to Thursday related to work stuff. And I was like, oh, this is just another, at one moment it's like, oh, it's just another appointment. And I was like tempted to like reschedule. I was like, oh, let's do this week. I'm busy. And then I, it's almost like when they say, if you don't have time, if you can't find time to meditate, that's a sign that you should be meditating. Yeah. So it's like, wait a minute, I've been presented with an opportunity to like slow down. I've been presented with an opportunity, a gift. I've been given a gift by you to talk about what's happening in my world at this moment. And, I'm so grateful that I, accepted that gift from you because, a lot of times I don't recognize that it's a gift and I don't, the universe has given me a sign. We talked about this earlier. Like, you want a sign that you're supported. You want a sign that you're adding value. You want a sign that you're ready to connect with other human beings who see the way that you the world that you do. I'm giving you this opportunity. Here it is. Brother Maxi. I'm sending Brother Maxi to you to engage in a conversation. So open to the signs. And I'm glad I got out of my own head and I went into my heart and I'm saying, this is exactly where I'm supposed to be right now, spending this, this time with you. And I'm so grateful for you for our connection, our energy, whatever brought us to this point in time, to building and maintaining this relationship and this friendship and this brotherhood that we share together. So thank you so much for this container. Thank you so much for what you do. Thank you so much for being present in this world, for being the person that you are, for being the man that you are. You are really inspiring to me.
thanks, bro. Thanks, bro.
Mm-hmm. Keep doing what you're doing.
Yes, and you too.
Yeah.
You too.
Yeah. I will.
This line is always open, you know that, and
yeah.
And yeah, looking forward to just keep this alive.
Yeah,
in
for sure.
whatever format and shape and form and
Yeah.
whatever. And I'm so fucking proud of you for showing up, not just to this conversation, but to this work. Yeah. All right, bro. Thank you. Hey, beautiful listener, you have made it all the way through. And I want to take a moment to say thank you. And you can do me an enormous favor. It's all I'm going to ever ask from you. And that is to go to your podcast app right now. And if you enjoyed the episode, give the podcast a 5-star rating. If you want to write 1-2 words or sentences, even more powerful, even better. Thank you, already in advance. And also, while you're at it, just click on that follow button, on that bell notification, so that you never miss a new episode. All of that just contributes, and it helps me to increase the reach of the podcast. That means I can attract bigger guests, and that means I can deliver more powerful episodes. So it's a tiny thing. I'm only gonna ask this little favor of you ever, not more. 10-15 seconds of your time, a couple of clicks, that's it. Makes a huge difference for me as a creator. So thank you so much.